Hello everyone, today I'm covering the Game Console R35S. The R35S is a clone of the Powkiddy RGB20S. Now I have to be completely honest, when I first started this YouTube channel, I never would have predicted I would have ended up not only reviewing clones of Powkiddy handheld, but multiple clones within the same month, but here we are. So, being a clone of the RGB20S, the conveniently similarly sounding R35S has pretty much identical specs, including the RK3326 chip, so we'll emulate up to PlayStation 1 comfortably and some Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, DS and PSP titles. It also has a 3.5-inch IPS screen and the same 640 by 480 resolution, 1 GB of RAM and a 3200 mAh battery. The box states Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but I haven't been able to get it working with the out-the-box firmware. Speaking of which, straight out of the box, I actually think the R35S makes a pretty good first impression. It comes in 4 colour variants, blue, yellow, white and transparent, me choosing the transparent option, and I think the shell looks, to be fair, and feels great. The level of transparency is spot on in my opinion, and the screen, like the RGB20S it was cloned from, looks perfectly suited for the shape of the handheld, with it being a pretty decent display in its own right. Underneath, we've got 2 USB-C ports and the headphone jack. To the right, we've got the volume buttons and the first microSD slot. On the left, we've got the second as well as the power and reset buttons. On the back, we've got 4 chunky, clicky and slightly oddly shaped shoulder buttons. And on the front, we've got a mono speaker, the start, select and function buttons, as well as 2 small click and analog sticks, and the D-pad and face buttons to the lower edges of the case's design. The controls being so close to the edge does feel a bit unnatural when you're resting your fingers on the shoulder buttons and stretching your thumbs downwards, but if you imagine the shoulder buttons don't exist and grip the handheld at the bottom, the R35S doesn't feel too bad. The shoulder buttons are ridiculously clicky and the analog sticks suffer from restricted travel and not being recessed into the case, but are passable. The face buttons are a tad small, but are actually very good, with a lot of response to them, and a very quiet press and very nice level of resistance too. The D-pad is just about passable, but unfortunately it isn't nearly as responsive as the face buttons are, as it's super loose with barely any resistance in any direction, which is great for arcade titles but translates pretty well to fighters too, but it is very limiting with other retro games. Overall, the controls aren't terrible but could certainly be better. The firmware included is a forked version of the RCOS firmware, which by itself I'm really a huge fan of. This is a R35S version of it. Unfortunately, the out-of-the-box theme hides options like the Wi-Fi setup from the option menu, but has some of the dev options either available or on by default, so it can be a pretty confusing experience for those not familiar with the RCOS, trying to get the most out of the overall fantastic base that's there. Even when switching the themes around, I haven't yet been able to get the Wi-Fi actually working on my handheld yet. I'm not sure if this is just a my handheld thing or an ongoing issue with the firmware or handheld, but I'll continue to investigate and update with my findings later. There's a bit of a thrown together feel with this kind of bits, as the R35S comes loaded with ROMs, but not all the BIOS files, so it just feels that ending not quite there, which is a bit of a shame considering just how good the RCOS base actually is. Anyway, I'll cut some gameplay now and summarise it back up at the end. So, the Game Console R35S certainly has its share of compromises and quirks, and does have a bit of a clone feeling to it. But, to my surprise, overall it's not actually too bad, all things considered. It's not the first handheld I'd recommend a purchase, but if you can find it at a reasonable price, it's not actually too bad overall. So, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching.